Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Med School Minutes podcast, where we discuss what it takes to attend and successfully complete a medical program. This show is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. Here is your host, Kaushik Gua.
Thank you so much for tuning in again to another episode of Med School Minutes. Today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Torabi, who just matched into residency last year. She was one of our students and is an active member of our alumni association. This is a part of our residency series where we are interviewing people who are associated with St. James and talking about their residency journey. We've had people in different phases of their residency career. Some people who have finished their residency and are program directors. And we have a unique perspective from Dr. Torabi, who is a PGY-1. So without any further ado, let's welcome Dr. Torabi.
So, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So Dr. Torabi, without further ado, if you would give us a little bit of a background, your education, what you did, what you're doing now, and what the hope is in the next couple of years for you to achieve. If you could give us a little bit of that.
Sure. So my first name is Shahrzad. I'm originally from Iran. I came to Canada. I lived in Toronto since I was 16 with my family. I did my undergrad in York University in Toronto, and I did psychology and kinesiology for my undergrad. I took a year break after undergrad, about a year or more, and then I found out about St. James School of Medicine. To be quite honest, I'm not sure where I heard about them, but I attended a few of the open houses in Toronto. I still remember more than 3, because I remember I was still looking into medical schools. And then I started to think about which school I wanted to go to. I remember again, then you guys had another campus in Bon Air, so that's when I was looking into attending St. James. The rest of it, so I started in 2017, and again, pandemic happened when I was a medical student. That was not fun. We're going to talk about that. And so I applied to residency, OBGYN residency last year, and I'm currently PGY-1 OBGYN resident in Michigan. It's a little town, a little bit south of Detroit. It's 20 minutes drive south of Detroit. And I love every second of it.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you just came off of a 24-hour shift. Is that right?
I did, yeah. So I was on call for 24 hours last night. I came home around 7:38. I slept a few hours. I'm maybe I can sleep a little bit more if they can push it back. Thanks for being so flexible around it.
Oh, no. Our pleasure. Of course, we're going to work around your schedule. So, for our students, so this whole podcast, at least these next couple of episodes that we're shooting, they're really a part of our residency prep series, so to speak.
Right.
And we've had this for a couple of years, and with every group of student counselors that we get, student counselors are basically students who have just very recently graduated, and we kind of hire them before they match. And we use them to improve the program. And this whole residency prep aspect of it was, to be honest, largely spearheaded by our student counselors going back 5 years. And with every step of the way, the program has improved. So this year, we have a series of at least 5 webinars and sessions, which includes the first one was the kickoff meeting, where we kind of tell people that, hey, tokens went out. These are the timelines. These are things you need to look out for. After that, we do a tips and tricks. We actually go through a webinar on how to fill out the ERAS. Then we do a webinar on tips and tricks. And then typically we have one or two programs where we have program directors, very new residents who are going typically PGY, just like yourself, um,
Mhm.
telling students about what to do, what not to do, what their experience was, what they could have done differently. And then finally, we have an interview, a mock interview session, which we'll have for the first time this year. And Dr. Hanan and Dr. Nizamani are spearheading that. So we're going to be doing all of that, and that's why we're really grateful to you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course.
You just got residency, and the last couple of times we've actually spoken to our former students who've become program directors, our former students who are actually fully licensed physicians at this point. And this is a different take. So we will have another video coming out with the PGY-2. So we're trying to catch every aspect. How
That's
is it
amazing.
different? So, and as you said, you actually, had a 24-hour shift. Can you give
Right.
us a little bit more information what that means? Does that mean you're scrubbed in 24 hours, walking up and down,
Of course, yeah.
can't even
I mean,
blink?
I would love to tell you about my day yesterday because it was like one big chaos, and I think it was one of the hardest nights since I started, which is only like
Okay.
2 months ago.
Okay.
But yeah, so my program again, so it's different for every program, as I was saying. It's the program scheduling is different for every hospital, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
and every specialty. So for my specialty and for my hospital, we have 24-hour calls. Some programs, they have like night flows, which you are on nights only for like a whole month. I personally prefer this because I get like post call days, which is like today I get to sleep. And if I get to sleep at night when I'm on call, which rarely happens, but if it does happen, I can like maximize my post call day. So when I start my day, my day starts around like 6:30 at my program. So we get sign out from the night, whoever was on call on 24-hour call the night before me, another resident or another attending. So I get sign out from them, and how we work, like we have, instead of pagers, we have like apps on our phone. So I pick up a role during the day. So my day shift would be either OB or GYN. So depending on what rotation I'm on that night. So this night I'm on GYN. Last month I was on OB. So this month I'll just pick up the GYN role, junior GYN role. And so for me, I go to any minor cases, major cases. For major cases like hysterectomy or robotics, the cool thing about my program, we do robotic surgeries since like PGY-1. So we get to scrub in from day one and be familiar with it. We don't get to like sit for robots till we're end of PGY-2, but we are familiar with it by the time we get there. So any robotic surgery, any hysterectomy, like major cases like that, we scrub in with our seniors, third and fourth years. And any major cases, we just do it on our own at this point. I didn't do it last time, but at this point, like I'm more comfortable doing minor cases by myself. And so during the day, I'm just GYN at this point and doing cases and any consults that comes in the door in the emergency that counts as GYN. I take care of those, and I pretty much anyone on the floor who's admitted for any gynecology related or any post-op patient, I just manage those. And then at 5:30 to 6, because I'm 24-hour on call, the person who was doing the OB role in the morning and a resident who was in charge of the floor will sign out to me and goes home. So I'm gonna pick up the OB role as well, and I'm just gonna take care of OB and GYN for the next 12 hours until the next day comes, and all the residents will roll in, and whoever is on OB will just get sign outs for OB patients, whoever delivers throughout the night. everyone delivered last night. So it was quite a busy night. And I had like 3 ectopic patients in the emergency, like tons of consults, like a lot of triages that come in, they're all OB. So it was a night to remember.
Well,
But
I can.
yeah, that's pretty much how it works.
Well, that's awesome because I
Yeah.
can totally imagine so many rotation students, clinical students would be like, "Oh, I can't wait to be in those shoes,"
Right,
and
yeah,
you're getting to live it. So, I mean,
right.
you know, I know it's definitely challenging and most certainly stressful, but this is what you literally work towards in the last 4 years, give or take.
Right. That's what keeps me going.
I
Honestly,
know.
sometimes I just think about how far I came and I'm like, I'm really doing this. It's me. Like they're asking me what I want to do. But yeah, it's refreshing.
Since this is in terms of the residency prep, I need to ask you some questions
Hmm.
related to number one, your feelings before you matched. How confident
Of
were you?
course. Yeah.
Um, and what did you do, before match day last
Oh,
day?
before that's an amazing question. Before match day, I took a 2 weeks trip.
Okay.
So because yeah, so the day that the day I submitted my rank list,
Mm-hmm.
the day after that actually it was, I think it was March 1st I submitted it. March 2 was the deadline. On March 2nd I took a trip to Puerto Rico. It was one of
Okay.
my friends' wedding there.
Okay.
So I was there for a week. Then I went to San Martin. Actually, I didn't visit Angola, but I went to San Martin for a week. I was there, and I came back the night before Monday that we had to open the email. So I didn't feel anything, no
Okay.
anxiety. I'm like, I'm not gonna just sit there and wait for 2 weeks. But yeah, I highly suggest that if someone can do it.
Okay.
I was working part time, but I made sure that they understand I need those 2 weeks off to just not be here, to just
Okay.
not be
No, that's actually
present. And
really,
it
really
really
good advice.
helped. And I was on vacation, someone new, so I was really distracted. And when I came back, I was just so exhausted. I slept the whole night, and I just woke up and opened the email. It's a
Oh,
beautiful
wow.
email.
I know. So this has probably got to be the top 2 emails or 3 emails in your life, right?
Right, right. Honestly, I was telling my co-residents because they're all American grads. I'm the first IMG that has ever
Oh,
applied to, like, ever got, matched in this program.
okay.
And they don't know much about the
Right.
IMG. They don't know anything about IMG work, so it's very new to them. But I was telling them that the Monday of the match week is more important to any
Hmm.
IMG applicant than the
Right.
Friday. Like
Right.
my co-resident, this sweet girl, she's also an American grad, but she was telling me how excited she was on Friday because she was sure that she matches.
Right.
So
Right.
the Monday that she got the email that she got on
Oh,
Monday was not a big deal to her, and she wasn't like grasping the importance of like
right.
just matching,
Right.
because I did dual apply to internal medicine too,
Right.
which I was gonna obviously if anyone wanted to know, so I did apply to internal medicine as well. But so to me, the programs that I interviewed with and I ranked them in the orders of my preference, I liked all of them. So if I ended up anywhere, I would be happy. But again, um, yeah, that Monday was nerve wracking,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
But I think that that's really good advice that you gave that, you know, do something that truly distracts you. And you took a trip, which is really smart because I've
Right.
seen so many students um, become a nervous wreck as time goes on, all the way till the day
Right. That would have been
before.
me. That would have been me if I stayed, but I knew that I just can't.
Right. I
No
mean,
more
but
stress. Yeah.
I think you adapted so uniquely. That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
If you had told us that you were in Saint Martin, we would have asked you to go and visit Anguilla,
Right.
and what would have happened at that point is that we would have taken up the cost of your stay in St. Martin
Oh,
and your
that's
trip.
nice.
But
Yeah.
the good news is
I was
that
a
now,
nervous ball. I was a nervous ball back then. I just couldn't. I was just isolated. I took a trip, like I was by myself. Like I didn't go
okay,
with anyone. I just wanted to be, just isolated somewhere nice.
nice.
But yeah, so
But
it worked.
now that once you finish your PGY 3 and finish your residency, after that, whenever
Hmm.
you have time, we'd love to have you back to St. Vincent or
Of
Anguilla
course, yeah,
to
I would
talk to
love
our
that.
students.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
But you mentioned that your program, you're the first IMG that they've ever taken
Right,
historically.
right,
But this is even more unique because typically everybody who goes to a Caribbean school gets categorized as an IMG. But in your case,
right,
you're truly an international student because you are Canadian, right?
right.
And I'm
So when I was,
assuming,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So that's a good point, because when I did apply and I got interviews and the interview went pretty well and I got great feedbacks and I really liked the program too, like the structure of it. I reached out to them and I told them I really like them, but I'm concerned because I need a visa. And even though they told me that they do, it's a corporate, so it's not
Mhm.
like a small hospital. They're like,
Right.
our hospital, our program has never accepted IMGs, but you don't have to worry about it because our corporate will hire you. But even though it was still I was so nervous to rank them my number one, because I'm like, what if I match and they can't sponsor me? Like, to the day before I got my J1 on my passport, I was still nervous that what if it
Okay.
doesn't work and no one knows how to fix it.
Right.
But yeah, so it goes like, I just want to mention again that there's no one route, and just because no one else before you couldn't do it doesn't mean that you cannot, because there's something that no one else has tried or didn't want to try, not because they couldn't, they just didn't think of it, that you can do, and then you can make the impossible possible, because
Right.
this program would never have thought that they would even like consider IMGs. And based on
Right.
what I know, later on, I was one of the only two that they interviewed, and I was the one who matched.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Well, congratulations.
Right.
But
Thank you.
so when do you bring up this whole situation that you need a visa? Is this during the interview? Is it post interview? When would a student bring this up?
So I did not bring it up at all. So
Okay.
how I did it, I only applied to programs that I had a chance of getting an interview, because I don't know, not for everyone, obviously, but for me, the cost of applying was also an issue. So it's not like I had like $20,000 aside just for applying to, like, mass applying to every program. And it's not a great idea, because even if I didn't match the first try, I would not do it the second try, because I know even programs that they do say on their website that they do offer J1 status, J1 visas or H1B, or they do accept whatever criteria that I didn't meet, even that I did meet. Even those programs, they just reject you for no reason. So how I filtered them, obviously I used like engines like Residency Explorer and Frida. I did not pay for any, like, Match a Resident or things like that. So anything free that I could like get my hands on, I used, and I filtered those programs that had like 95% or like 70% chance of matching with my J1 status. So that was my first number one filter, because obviously, even if I'm like 100% match, and if they cannot sponsor me, what's the point of paying? Like, even if it's $30, like, what's the point? They're going to reject me like 5 minutes after I submit my application, which happens. Like, it's so funny because one of the programs actually, like, my first rejection letter was like 15 minutes after I submitted my ERAS. It was so depressing.
Wow.
Like, okay, what
Well,
did
they
I
don't
do?
know
And
what
they're
they
like,
missed.
so they, thank you. So they said that we don't offer J1, even though they mention on their website that they do. So they haven't updated it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just so tricky to filter them out. But for me, it took just 3 weeks of dedicated searching every single program, if that meant like calling them or emailing the program coordinators. And obviously not the directors are not gonna like answer your visa questions, but like coordinators or anyone that I could know that I knew in the program who could like give me that information, that is it actually worth applying? Are they actually gonna consider my application because I'm a J1 applicant? So things like that. So I didn't just rely on the search engines. Like I actually sat down, made an Excel sheet of every program that I'm applying to. And I only ended up, for those who are again interested, this is how specific my application was. Because I really wanted to stay close to home, which is East Coast, I didn't not waste is a bad word to say. I didn't like spend more money that I was supposed to any West Coast program because I was not interested to go or any southern states. I didn't because I was not interested to go, and I knew that they're not going to accept me because I didn't have enough reason to prove them that I want to go there. And especially for an IMG Canadian applicant who's applying to OBGYN. Like I had all the, hardships in my application. So I didn't do that. But so any East Coast program that I applied, I ended up matching, a good candidate for an interview for only 28 programs. That's not a big number.
That
and
isn't, yeah.
If anyone would do the same, it's just like it saves a lot of money for every single candidate, especially if someone like me is just like they have a tight budget of applying. I really suggest just making that time, a week or two of dedicated every day. I was like searching, like it took a long time. Like from 8 to like 4, I was just like searching programs on my phone or just calling them or making a list of like calling coordinators to make sure that they would actually, and a lot of them are honest and they would tell you no. Unfortunately, we just want like American citizens or green card holders. So just don't apply to those programs. And then I ended up with like 28 good programs that they would like actually consider me. And what other thing that I did, I networked really hard. That's something that a lot of people don't know how much time consuming it is. And by network, I don't mean going to your network, because when I say network, a lot of people like reach out to me. Right now, I'm a PGY-1. Like I can help. The reality is that this is the most I can help people. I can't really go out of my way or just like put in a good word for anyone. When I say network, is that you physically going out of your bubble and meet new people. Like I don't know how many of the OB-GYN applicants from our school, if they wanted to apply and they didn't, have actually attended ACOG conferences. Or have actually went to different districts, because it comes in different districts. So the districts, like I'm District 5, so I attended the residency fair of ACOG District 5. So any program that has been like presented in that conference, I talked to them. That's something that maybe I didn't broadcast it when I was applying, but like I networked. I did something that I didn't hear from anyone else that they did. I'm like, maybe this will help. And it did. It's just a matter of when they're reading your application, whether or not they will recognize your name.
Right.
That's all it is.
Right.
If they recognize a familiar name and they pick up your application and they read through it, that's all you need to get a interview spot. And one of the interviews I got was because I kept calling the coordinator. I cold called the coordinator and they were not answering. So I left messages, and one time this nurse picked up and I got an interview out of it. And nurse picked up and they're like, yeah, you got transferred to the floor. And I asked the nurse, I'm like, listen, I'm one of the applicants and I've been trying to reach this lady. Do you mind just like getting a sticky note and putting a note on her folder? And she did. Like, and a week later, I got an interview. I was really shocked that it worked, but it worked. You
Right.
know, you don't lose anything, but it's a
Yeah.
matter of like doing that extra work that you know that you're being extra,
Right.
but
Right.
it's gonna work. You
Right.
know.
So what you mentioned and the advice that you just gave is actually really interesting because one thing that I've noticed with our students is that your approach to looking for a residency was very, very similar to a job hunt, where
Exactly.
if you want to go, whereas a lot of our students tend to treat this like, okay, I'm applying to another educational program, but that is absolutely not
No,
the case.
it's not.
It's a
Yeah.
job hunt. You have to network. You have to show that you're standing out from the rest, even if it's like, as you just pointed out, calling the nurse on the floor and saying, "Hey, I'm applying. I'm
Right.
trying to get a hold of this person. I got transferred to you. You need to help me out." But
They couldn't even believe that I'm calling. They said,
yeah,
why are you calling here? I'm like, can you just like put this message?
yeah,
They're like, okay, she's really
yeah.
insisting on like getting this done. So they did it, you know. And when I got an interview, I was like joking with the coordinator. I'm like, listen, is that why? She's like, oh yeah.
Right. So what you have essentially done is boil down and strategized your job search or your residency search like a job search, which is very similar to what these other high-powered careers like consulting, investment banking, and lawyers tend to do.
Right,
The big difference is that most lawyers and in most MBAs and consultants are or most investment bankers and consultants are MBAs. They're actually
right.
their duration of their graduate program, they're actually taught how to do this.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and
That's a
and
very good point.
whereas in medical school, all you're doing is literally learning about medicine, and you're
Right,
never really taught to do this, but you have brought this down to a science, like with a spreadsheet, with networking. I mean, and
right,
and I think that that is truly the difference in how you stood out, because it definitely
right.
sounds like that.
Yeah,
um
thank you. And also what you mentioned, like it's very important to know that I mean, I'm not saying like anyone who has gone through like an American school route will have like better support, but even for those students, it's very important to understand that it's you who has
hmm
to get that job. Like
right,
you cannot rely on your school regardless of which school you went to. It's important to understand that just because just going through the website of your school and seeing where they match, necessarily you will match there. There's much more to it than like when those people who have matched those places. There's more to it, as you mentioned. It's like a job hunt.
right,
So you're done with school and you have to be on your own, see what you can do differently if you want to end up in a certain program. And
yeah,
like getting out there and physically putting yourself there so they can see you. And
right.
this program that I've been to, I auditioned here. They would have
Oh, okay.
never like picked up an American like an IMG who's
Right,
an
right.
MD because
Okay.
they were traditionally DO. So I'm the
Yeah.
first MD that they wanted
Oh,
to
okay.
try, you know. So
Okay.
there's a lot of new things on my application and they really wanted me because they saw me in person.
Right,
You know what
right,
I mean?
right.
And again, by networking, I don't mean just residency. So when I auditioned in different hospitals, I met residents who came from other programs. So I reached out to their programs. Just by doing one audition,
Oh,
I met
okay.
like three different residency programs. You know what I
Wow.
mean? So
Yeah.
just like constantly thinking about new ways to like expand that horizon. So it's just the matter of thinking in ways that it's new to you, you
Right,
know, just
right,
it's scary and it's like stepping out of that comfort zone. It is always scary to me, but it always pays off, you know.
right,
So it's just a matter of like not doing what I say right now on this podcast, but thinking
right,
of ways that you can try that I haven't,
right.
you
So it's
know.
almost like if you analyze this logically, it's like, okay, my current status quo is I don't have any residency or interviews. But if I meet this resident and I ask him for help, worst case scenario is he says no and your status quo doesn't change. Best case scenario,
Exactly.
you can potentially get an interview. That's
Right.
really, and as the saying goes, if you want to hit a home run, you got to swing. Like you're never
Right.
going to hit a home run if you're not swinging. So,
Exactly.
but that's really interesting. One other thing that I wanted to touch upon was that you had mentioned earlier that you had actually you were focusing on two, internal medicine as well as OB.
Right. And I'll tell you why. Yeah.
And yes, so please tell us why and how did you narrow that down when you actually how did you disclose that, or how did you emphasize that in your personal statement?
Sure.
Because that's a big challenge. A lot
It
of
is.
questions I get, and students are like,
Yeah.
but you can't really have in the two personal statements in the ERAS applications, can you?
You can. Yeah. You can have like
Okay.
up to how many, if you're applying to 100 programs, you can have 100 personal statements.
Okay. And
but are you going to write 100 personal statements? That's
right,
the
of course, yeah. So okay,
question.
so you in your ERAS application you had two distinct personal statements, is that right?
Right. I had more because
Oh,
there were
okay.
programs that I really liked that I wrote an extra paragraph for. Something, again, that I've only heard from someone who has succeeded before.
Okay.
So I tried that. So I'm telling everyone now what works for me. You don't have to do it. A lot of people don't, and they still succeed. But if you're in my position, if you're Canadian, you're IMGs and, all that, you have to do the extra work.
Okay.
You can't just like expect that, well, they got it, I'm going to get it. No, I need a visa. My chances are 1 in 28, and I'm going to have to do anything I can and extra to make sure that they even look at my application. So my personal statement, I had two main ones. I had internal medicine and OBGYN. And obviously, again, I got a lot of comments during interviews from residents chief residents who read my my personal statement, and the program directors. I loved it. Like, I didn't finalize it since till 2 days before submitting my ERAS application. But I think the most beautiful thing about my ERAS application was my personal statement.
Okay.
So it wasn't just like a generic statement. Mine was literally a story. So if you pick up a book and if you're like reading a story, like mine was a storyline of my life, and it was just like so touching. And some program directors like asked me about like specific sentence that I wrote. It was that specific. And so it wasn't that different between internal medicine and OBGYN because it was my life,
Right.
But I did in internal medicine point out to a few things in my life that made me want to be a women healthcare provider,
Okay.
So that's the different thing. But internal medicine, I would not apply to internal medicine if I knew that I would be miserable. My personality would have fit in internal medicine as well, but my priority was OBGYN. I was really pessimistic in thinking about like if I don't match on first try, I would not match on the second try OBGYN, right? So I don't suggest everyone to be this pessimistic like I was. Like there's still a chance. Like there are people who match on the second try and they can get into competitive, specialties. But my goal was that if I don't get in any OBGYN residency on the first try on my first, cycle, I would only focus on internal medicine next because that was my second favorite, right? So my thought process was that if I'm trying the first try, why don't I just apply to internal medicine as well and just save myself a year because I can rank them in the order that I want, right?
Okay.
So I did not broadcast it in any of my residency application. And I talked to residents and I asked their advice, OBGYN residents, and they said the same thing. They're like, don't broadcast it at all. Like, don't say anything in your personal statement that even resembles
Right.
has a resemblance to like, OBGYN application or sorry, internal medicine application. So my personal statements were quite like the structure skeleton was the same because it was the story of my life. But like for internal medicine, I pretty much like talked about why I'm interested in internal medicine. Originally, before even applying to any, like even getting my token, I was thinking about family medicine, but family medicine was because I'm an IMG and we have to be realistic. It is competitive. Certain specialties are more competitive than others. So, but I just could not see myself being a good family medicine ever. And I would not be happy, So, but internal medicine was different to me. So I just included a small paragraph of why this specialty, just like OBGYN. And then, as I said, for certain programs, which they have seen me in person, or I really wanted to get an interview from them for a specific reason, I made the time to write a specific paragraph, even if it's like few sentences, to say why. But for every single personal statement I submitted, regardless of that extra paragraph, I wrote down at the end the name of their program. So they know that I'm making that 2 minutes extra time
Right.
to edit it on my, you know what I mean? Things like that. They'll be like,
absolutely.
oh, this is for us.
Yeah.
She has an extra letter just for us, even if I didn't write that extra paragraph. So when I say I did those extra things, I was always thinking to myself, am I being extra? It's extra. No one does this. Like, why would I have to like have like the 50 personal statement on my ERAS application? But I think it worked.
Okay.
I think like, they liked it. Even if they didn't mention it, I think that's the reason I got some interviews.
Wow. So, I mean, again, it seems like one of your biggest advantages has been that, and no pun intended here, that you've made the application process very clinical, so to speak. Like,
Very, yeah.
you were very you were very methodical. You were very focused, and you had a lot of these little pointers that you developed on your own, which I think a lot of our students just don't really ever do. From my understanding, as I mentioned, a lot of our students treat this like an application to another educational program, which is significantly different from a job because you get paid here.
Right. And they don't have to accept you. There are like thousands of other people that they can get. And if you're not telling them how much you love them and how different their program is to you, they will just go with someone else who's more persistent, And I'm sure it was the same when I was applying. Like I was making sure they know how special they are to me that they gave me an interview, I was being extra. I know sometimes like I was like doing the extra work, but I think they could pick up the vibe that I'm genuinely like interested to like end up somewhere like that. So
I have one more question for you, and then I'll let you go. I've heard about a lot of these services that you can pay them and they kind of write the personal statements for you.
Right.
However, I've also spoken to program directors, and a lot of program directors have said that we can identify these particular applications that are written by these large companies, and I believe it's a multi-million/billion-dollar business out there.
I bet. Yeah.
That does this. But program directors, incidentally, the handful that I've spoken to, said that that's not the best idea. In fact, I've actually met a guy who applied for 4 times using one of these services, never matched, and then he was like, you know what, I'm just going to use my own writing skill, which he thought that he wasn't a good writer. But when he wrote the application or the personal statement for the 5th time, he got like not a single call for 4 years, and his 5th attempt he got like 5 interviews. What's your take on using these services? Did you use a service for your personal statement? How
I
was that?
definitely didn't, but I can see why people would. As I said, I was struggling with like finalizing it till literally 2 days before I submitted it. And I hated it when I started writing. I'm like, I have nothing to write about, and I had to like reflect a lot on my life, not just something really interesting for a residency application, not just for the personal statement, for even filling out your job experiences. You have to reflect a lot about what happened in your first year of medical school. I'm like,
Mm.
what was I doing? What did I do the first month? What did I do the second month? How can I make it like more appealing to them? What I did in residency fairs. Like, I think I did a like mediocre job in residency fair, even though like I was like, I don't know, class rep when I was there, but like, was it special? But when you make it special, make it sound
Mm-hmm.
special for someone who didn't have that experience, it's going to be, that's the difference that you can make, like things that I did throughout my life that I wasn't even thinking about till I started filling out my residency application.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, maybe I should include this too. And it made the whole thing more beautiful because like it's a better picture of who I am at
I
the end.
see.
And same thing for residents for personal statements. I'm so against it for so many reasons. And I'm so glad I didn't because that's the reason my personal statements stand out. And I'm not just saying because I loved it. I was happy that people like would bring it up, that how different it was than other personal
Right,
statements.
right.
It was so personal. It has to be personal. Someone who has never met you and you like pay them um, um, on internet would not be able to do a good job. Like they might
Right.
be able to like someone who has no ability in like writing in English would maybe like consider that. But if you put like 2 3 months of dedication to actually make a masterpiece out of it, that's like gonna increase your chances of it's not something that I wrote in like 2 nights. I'm not able to do that. But the reason I love it so much, it's because I worked on it for like 3 months of summer. I was just like every day working on that. Everything I was like thinking about, I was like, maybe I should put that somewhere in my application. It was point form when I started. You
Okay.
know what I mean? And and after I got into residency recently, actually, our program director was mentioning to some of the students, which I didn't know, that one of the reasons that he even considered giving me the interview, even though I auditioned there, he wasn't considering it until he read my personal statement.
Oh,
He's like,
wow.
I didn't know you when you were here, but the things that you mentioned there, I'm like, I want this girl to work for me because she's gonna work. That's
Right.
literally his words. So make it about you and what's so important about you and what makes you stand out. And so they would know you. They want to get to know you more in interview. It might sound simple when I put it this way, but that's literally what it is. So they have thousands of these that they read and they
Yeah.
have no reason to like why would they want to get to know you?
Right.
Why are you so
Right.
interesting? Because everyone is, but you have to understand, you have to know yourself enough to know what to write there so people would want to have you around for 3 years. Same thing for interview. Like,
Okay.
are you going to be interesting enough for them to like have you around for 2 years? I'm sure anyone who has gone through Caribbean route is interesting enough. I
Right.
might be biased to say that,
No,
but
no,
you are unique enough to go through that route. You just have to find it and make
absolutely.
sure how to present it.
Yeah. I mean, you've got such an adventure studying in different islands, studying in different hospitals, which is so much more to speak about than most American graduates. So again,
I
it's looking
agree.
at
Yeah.
it's looking at the glass half full instead of half empty, and making the most of it. And that's something that you've uh, really aced at doing. And I personally think that this is all the advice that you've given us today is fantastic. It's going to help so many students. You've
Thank you. I hope so.
you've brought down the residency application to a very organized and strategic approach, which is networking, and then 3 months on a personal statement. Honestly, we've talked about personal statements before, but no one's really put a timeline around it as far as, 3 months. And a personal
Right.
statement is probably what, 1,500 words, if I'm not mistaken?
So I didn't put a limit on it like that. So
Okay.
I remember mine was like a page, maybe like 4 lines over a page, something like
Okay.
that. So I don't know how many words it was, but
Yeah.
I tried to make it more interesting than like
Right.
if it has to be short or long.
Yeah.
Because my story, the way that I was writing it, I mean, I bragged about it a lot, but it was
No,
great.
you
But the
should.
way I was writing it, it was so interesting. My point, whoever I gave it to like edit or give opinion on, was I wanted to make sure they're not going to be distracted when they're writing it, when they're reading it. And whoever read
Okay.
it, they didn't put it down. That was my point.
Okay.
All I wanted was for the story to be interesting enough so they wouldn't put it down. And that's what I want from a program director. Because
Right.
if you
Right.
lose
Right.
them after first paragraph, they're not going to read it.
Yeah. That's
They don't have
amazing.
to zone out, things like
Right.
that. Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, Dr. Torabi. Your advice
Of
has been
course, yeah.
spectacular. It's such a unique perspective. I mean, we've spoken to several people, program
Mm-hmm.
directors, about their perspectives, and we've spoken to people who've matched a couple of years ago.
Right.
It seems like your advice is a lot more fresh because you just went through this.
Right.
Like a lot of student or a lot of our folks who've gone through the residency before don't necessarily recollect how long they spent on their personal statement. But I think it's
Right.
pretty unanimous that they say that is
Thank you
the
so
most
much.
important part.
I don't know if you have time. I was hoping to mention something with OBGYN residency that
Sure,
started last year.
sure.
So people who have gone through a OBGYN residency application last year, seriously, like that was like a serious consideration for them, not as a backup. A lot of people have one OBGYN as a backup. Maybe that's why they miss out on a lot of like opportunities like residency fairs and stuff. They're not actively looking. It's not necessarily a bad thing, just like how I was with internal medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't like actively looking at what I can do to make my application better. So for OBGYN, there's a new thing. It's called a standard letter of evaluation. So anyone who have applied to emergency medicine prior to last year know about
Okay.
SLOE. But with OBGYN, it was a new thing that was started last year. And they announced it a month before we were submitting our application.
Oh wow.
So I
Okay.
lost hope when they announced it because I'm like, I already have my letters and I'm not going to have it and I'm not going to get into any interviews. So I reached out to one or two of attendings who would accept to write another letter instead of letter of recommendation that they submit. You send them a form, which is online. Anyone can find it. You send them a form. Some people even have it. You just have to ask them and they will fill it out. And they have to submit it instead of the letter. You can't have a letter of recommendation and employee from the same person. And then after you submitted last year, it was optional. It was optional, but again, because of my status, I submitted 2 instead of
Okay.
0. So I could have just get by LOR, but instead I submitted 2 SLOE and then 2 regular letters for every program. And then because I have 13 letter of recommendation submitted by the time I was submitting my application, I went by region. If I was applying to Michigan, I only submitted letters from Michigan attending because they knew them and they were big there. Like I have so many other tips that I can like think of, but like these are the ones on top of my head that I think it made a difference. So if you are in a position that can get a lot of letters submitted by the time you're applying, and if you want to stay in Chicago, for example, submit your Chicago letters. Like attendings that are well known, and like they would know them. If a letter comes from them, they know who that attending is.
Wow.
And if you're in a position to get SLOEs and you're applying for OBGYN, please at least have one, because it shows them that you are dedicated to this specialty and you're listening to what they're recommending, even though if it's not a necessity.
Well, thank you so
use
much
your
for your
applicant.
time,
Yeah,
Dr.
of
Torabi.
course. Thank you.
And one thing I definitely want to remind all our alumni is that no matter where you go in life, your biggest supporters are always going to be beyond your immediate family is folks in this office in Chicago.
Thank
But
you
not
so
just
much.
that, as you move along your career, please consider us as a resource that
Yeah,
you
of
can
course.
lean on
Yeah,
when you need to. Because
for
just
sure.
because you went through 4 or 5 years of schooling with us, this is not the end of the road for us. As you know, as you go through licensing,
Right.
et cetera, we'll be there for you every step of the way. But at the same time, if you need additional help with anything that you can think of, we'd be more than happy to help out. So,
For sure. Okay.
all right. Well, thank you
you
so
so
much,
much. It was
Dr.
really
Torabi.
nice talking to you,
Yeah,
Shahrzad.
same here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Torabi, for giving us those wonderful nuggets of information. I will say, though, I've spoken to so many of our students who've gone through the match process. Your methodology for going about the applications was very, very meticulous and detail-oriented. And I truly hope that all of our students took away some valuable bits of knowledge from our conversation today. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Torabi, and we really appreciate you taking the time from your busy PGY-1 schedule. And also remember, there is no shortcut to becoming an MD.
Thank you so much for tuning into our show. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Med School Minutes. If you like our content, please follow us and receive notification when a new show is posted. This podcast is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. For a video version of this podcast, please check us out on sjsm.org/video.